Hi, it's Timothy. Today, I'm looking at Karens who had every chance to make a smarter choice and passed on every single one. From a Karen who ignored a storm and rough waves just to retrieve her expensive camera, to a Karen who swam in a beach full of stingrays after being warned, only to regret it in the worst way possible. It was the morning of January 23, 2017, when a powerful Pacific winter storm battered Ocean Beach Pier in San Diego. Towering waves crashed over the concrete deck as strong winds drove seawater across the railings. Hours earlier, lifeguards and police officers had closed the pier with barricades and warning signs, ordering everyone to stay away until the storm passed. Eunice Hart was 39 years old and worked as a freelance marketing consultant in San Diego. She spent much of her free time trying to build her online following. Friends often described her as confident, but they also knew she almost never liked hearing the word no. She was known for pushing back against rules she thought were unnecessary and believed she was the best person to decide what risks were worth taking. Eunice had arrived alone earlier that morning at the beach to photograph the dramatic storm for her growing social media accounts. As the weather worsened, lifeguards ordered everyone to evacuate immediately. Although she argued that she only needed one more minute, she was eventually forced to leave. In the rush, she accidentally left a camera backpack on a bench near the middle of the pier. Inside were an expensive DSLR camera, several lenses, her wallet, and her car keys. About 20 minutes later, Eunice returned and found the entrance sealed. A lifeguard explained that the backpack would be recovered once the storm passed, and that no one was being allowed onto the pier because the waves had already become powerful enough to sweep a person into the ocean. Instead of accepting the explanation, Eunice accused the staff of overreacting and insisted they were using the closure as an excuse to keep her belongings. She demanded that the barrier be opened just for her. Pulling out her phone, she began recording herself, insisting her viewers deserved to see how officials were preventing her from collecting her own property. She turned a storm evacuation into content. That decision to record was the moment everything went wrong. People told her again and again to stop, but Eunice did not listen. She walked past the barriers and onto the pier. By now, anyone could see it was not safe. The waves were not just splashing next to the pier anymore, they were crashing right over the top of it. Every few minutes, water rushed across the whole concrete walkway, leaving behind seaweed, wood, and puddles that made the ground very slippery. Some people watching yelled for her to turn back, but Eunice kept walking toward her backpack, filming the whole time. Getting her costly camera gear back and showing everyone that the pier didn't need to be closed mattered more to her now than any of the warnings other people had already listened to. And I am left wondering how expensive those properties must have been to ignore every warning. She had nearly reached the middle of the pier when an even larger wave slammed into the support columns below. A powerful surge of water rushed across the deck and knocked her clean off her feet. She hit the concrete hard and slid helplessly across the algae-covered surface. Before she could grab the railing, the retreating water pulled her underneath it and into the violent surf. Rescue teams rushed to help right away, but the same rough waves that had made everyone leave the pier also made it too dangerous for them to reach Eunice. Big waves kept crashing over the pier again and again, and strong currents in the water pulled her farther and farther away from the shore. And for each second she was in that storm, her chances of survival reduced. Marine rescue teams recovered her later that afternoon after conditions became safe enough to conduct a search. She was transported to a nearby hospital where doctors determined she had suffered cardiac arrest following prolonged submersion. Despite advanced resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as drowning, with blunt force injuries sustained after being thrown against the pier, contributing to the fatal outcome. Following the incident, the city installed lockable security gates, expanded storm warning signage, and increased enforcement whenever the pier was closed during severe weather. Eunice walked past barricades to retrieve a bag while filming the whole thing. Let's travel to New Zealand, where a camera strap and a short argument at a chairlift queue started a chain nobody could stop. It was the morning of July 18, 2019, at a busy ski resort in the southern Alps of New Zealand. School holidays had filled the slopes with visitors, and lift attendants repeatedly reminded guests to secure loose clothing and bags before boarding the chairlifts. Regina David was 34 years old and worked as a real estate agent in Christchurch. She lived with her husband and their 8-year-old son in a quiet neighborhood, where weekends were usually about family time, not sports outside. Regina was bold and spoke her mind. Her job had taught her how to argue her side well, and she almost never gave up once she thought she was right. The ski trip had been planned as a short winter getaway with friends. Regina carried a crossbody camera bag so she could quickly capture photographs without stopping to unpack. As she got to the front of a long line for the lift, she started feeling impatient with how slow it was moving. She had some sharp words with another skier about cutting in line. Then a lift worker noticed her camera strap hanging loose at her side. He asked her to step aside, make the strap shorter, and wait for the next chair, because a loose strap like that could get caught in the moving machines and cause trouble. Regina dismissed the warning, insisting the strap was harmless and accusing the attendant of delaying everyone unnecessarily. Before he could stop her, she hurried toward the arriving chair while glancing back at the disagreement instead of checking her bag. Insisting on her argument was more important than following the instructions. As the chair moved through the loading area, her loose camera strap looped around the outside armrest and got stuck under a metal bar as the chair kept going. The strap pulled tight right away, yanking Regina off the seat before she could sit down properly. She was dragged across the hard snow for a few yards before the chair lifted her up into the air, leaving her hanging by the trapped bag. Workers hit the emergency stop right away, but the chair had already moved past the loading area. By then, everyone knew the bag had never been worth the risk. Panicking, Regina twisted violently and pulled at the strap, trying to free herself before rescuers arrived. The repeated force placed enormous strain on the bag's plastic quick-release buckle until it suddenly fractured. The strap separated instantly, sending Regina falling several feet onto the hard-packed snow below. She struck the back of her head with tremendous force. The ski patrol got to her in just a few minutes. She was awake but confused, asking again and again what had happened and saying she had a bad headache. During the helicopter ride to a trauma hospital, she grew more and more sleepy, and her eyes stopped reacting to light the same way on each side. A scan showed a large blood clot pressing on her brain, causing dangerous swelling inside her skull. Neurosurgeons performed an emergency decompressive craniotomy to remove the clot, but the bleeding and severe cerebral swelling continued despite surgery and intensive care. Regina died later that evening, less than 10 hours after the accident. It took only 10 hours to go from vacation to the afterlife. After the accident, the chairlift was closed while investigators documented the scene, interviewed witnesses, and reviewed footage. They found no mechanical failure or operator error. Regina's friends, who had been waiting to board the following chairs, witnessed the fall. They later provided statements to investigators and remained at the hospital throughout the day, where one of them contacted Regina's husband in Christchurch to inform him of the accident. He and other family members were kept updated by hospital staff until they received news that Regina had died later that evening. The resort added clearer signs, staff training, and an equipment check zone, and shared the case with the Industry Safety Association for wider adoption. The next story takes us to Seoul, where another woman was given simple advice that could have saved her life. Instead of listening, she decided she knew better. It was the afternoon of June 5th, 2015, during the height of the MERS in South Korea. Public anxiety was growing as new hospital-linked infections appeared almost daily. Health officials urged anyone with symptoms to follow isolation instructions and avoid visiting multiple hospitals unless medically necessary. Han Soo-jin was a 45-year-old office manager from Seoul. She lived with her husband, Min-ho, and was known among friends for refusing to accept answers she did not like. If a cashier questioned her coupon, she demanded a manager. If a mechanic recommended repairs, she sought another opinion until someone agreed with her. She believed persistence always uncovered the real truth. When she got a cough and a mild fever, doctors at a nearby hospital told her to stay home and rest since her symptoms were not serious. She was angry that they didn't admit her and said the staff didn't know how to do their jobs. For the next 2 days, she went to several other hospitals, trying to find someone who would finally listen to her. During those visits, she caught MERS and later tested positive for it. Well, isn't this a perfect case of seek and you shall find? She should have just stayed home after the first test. The diagnosis only deepened her anger. She insisted the hospitals had infected her through negligence and declared she would never trust them again. Although doctors explained how to monitor her symptoms and when to return for treatment, she ignored the advice. Instead, she became convinced she could eliminate the virus herself. She purchased several powerful household cleaning products and spent hours reading online claims that stronger chemicals meant stronger protection. When she told Minho she planned to mix them into an ultimate disinfectant, he immediately objected. And I object too. That is definitely not how disinfectants are created. He showed her the warning labels that clearly said never to mix the products together, and he begged her to go back to the hospital instead. Soo-jin brushed him off, saying the manufacturers and doctors were hiding what really worked. The following morning, Minho left for work after making her promise to rest. Instead, she shut every window in the bathroom to keep the fumes concentrated, poured the cleaners into a bucket, and began scrubbing every surface while repeatedly wiping the mixture over her gloves and protective clothing. Within minutes, the mix made a cloud of poisonous gas. Her eyes and throat started burning right away. Then she began coughing hard with a tight, crushing feeling in her chest. Gasping for air, she stumbled toward the bathroom door, but each breath got harder than the one before. As the fumes kept filling the small room with no fresh air, her oxygen levels dropped. She reached for the doorknob but fell to the floor before she could get out. Around midday, Minho called her again and again, but got no answer. He grew worried, remembering their fight about the chemicals, so he left work early and drove home. As soon as he opened the front door, he smelled a strong chemical smell in the air. He pushed open the bathroom door and found Soo-jin lying on the floor, unconscious. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed severe inhalation injury caused by toxic fumes. She was placed on oxygen and later transferred to intensive care as fluid rapidly accumulated in her damaged lungs. Minho made her promise to rest before he left for work, only to come home to a locked bathroom and a chemical smell. I keep thinking about that walk through the front door. Even with strong treatment, the chemical damage turned into a serious lung problem, leaving her lungs unable to get enough oxygen into her body. Doctors said the harsh chemical fumes had badly damaged her lungs, and the MERS lung infection at the same time made her breathing even worse. She died a few hours after reaching the hospital. Investigators concluded that the fatal event was toxic inhalation from mixing incompatible household cleaning chemicals. Minho later told investigators that the tragedy had not begun in the bathroom. It had begun days earlier when fear convinced his wife that everyone else was wrong and only she knew how to protect herself. The next story in Dublin was nothing about protection or cures. It was just a woman following her ex-boyfriend's delivery van through the neighborhood to complain about a dented box. It was the 12th of September, 2022, in the quiet suburb of Dublin, Ohio, just northwest of Columbus. The afternoon was warm, and delivery vans moved steadily through the neighborhood as drivers raced to finish hundreds of scheduled stops before sunset. Mary Collins was 34 years old. She had lived in Dublin for almost 10 years. She worked as a senior insurance claims worker for a company in Columbus. Most days, she looked at accident reports and helped people with hard problems. At home, she lived a quiet life, But her neighbors knew her well. She spoke her mind. She complained fast. She always made noise if something was not just right. She liked things done her way. She almost never backed down from a fight. Years earlier, Mary had dated Ian Hudson. Their relationship ended after they realized they wanted very different things in life, and the breakup left Mary with resentment she never fully let go of. Although years had passed, seeing Ian again reopened old wounds. That afternoon, Ian came to her house. He was the delivery man for her street now. He gave her a box and said hello, then went on his way. Mary opened the box. One corner was squashed flat. The thing inside was in good condition, but the messy box and seeing Ian again made her very upset. Emily, her little sister, was visiting. She told Mary to just call the delivery company and let it go. Mary said no. She was sure Ian needed to hear her complaint face to face, so she jumped in her car and drove after his delivery van. This wasn't about the box anymore. This was something much deeper. Emily just didn't notice that yet. A few streets away, Ian stopped outside another home to complete his next delivery. Mary parked across the street and waited until he returned to his idling van. Determined to stop him before he drove away, she hurried across the road without calling out. Ian got into the driver's seat and got ready to go. As his job rules said, he checked his mirrors and looked around the van. Then he slowly backed away from the curb. At that same moment, Mary walked into the spot behind the van that he could not see. Ian did not know she was there. He kept backing up. The back of the van hit Mary, and she fell down. He felt the bump, but before he could stop, one back wheel rolled over her lower body. Now we have more than a dented box to worry about. Someone just got dented. Emily, who had followed behind in her own car after failing to change Mary's mind, witnessed the collision. She ran toward the van, screaming for Ian to stop while calling emergency services. Neighbors rushed outside as paramedics arrived within minutes. Mary underwent emergency surgery for extensive internal injuries and severe pelvic trauma. Despite blood transfusions, surgery to control internal bleeding, and intensive care treatment, she developed irreversible hemorrhagic shock and multiple organ failure. She died the following morning. The medical examiner concluded that Mary died from multiple blunt force injuries to the abdomen and pelvis sustained in a low-speed motor vehicle collision. The manner of death was ruled an accident. Police investigators determined that Ian had followed normal reversing procedures and had no reasonable opportunity to see Mary after she unexpectedly entered the vehicle's rear blind spot. Although he was cleared of any wrongdoing, Ian later told investigators he wished he had seen her sooner and expressed deep regret over what had happened. Now, the next story moves to British Columbia, where a funeral brought an estranged family back together and old wounds back to the surface. It was the 12th of October, 2017, in British Columbia, Canada. Family members had gathered at the home in Vernon for a funeral. While some relatives quietly shared memories in the living room, others cleared the dining table, packed away food, and began washing dishes in the kitchen. Benita Lawrence was 55 years old. She lived in Calgary with her husband. Benita liked to do things her own way. She thought rules were more like suggestions. She almost always believed her way was the best way. People who knew Benita were used to this. She would question how others did things. She would fix their work even when they didn't ask her to. Sometimes she would just take over a job because she thought she could do it better. It was hard for her to believe that someone else's way could work just as well as hers. The year before, Benita's father had died. He had been very sick with cancer for a long time. Benita had helped take care of him during that time, but years of family arguments had made her feel like she couldn't really trust most people to do things the right way. Benita had a younger sister named Becky. After their parents split up a long time ago, Becky had stayed close with their mother. Benita, meanwhile, had stayed close with their father. The funeral brought the whole family together again for the first time in years. But it didn't take long for the old arguments to start right back up. Well, not all family reunions are happy ones. This definitely wasn't. Throughout the day, Benita repeatedly challenged decisions made by others. She questioned the funeral arrangements, criticized how relatives organized the reception, and interrupted people who were already completing simple tasks. Several family members quietly ignored the comments, hoping to avoid unnecessary arguments during an already emotional day. After lunch, Becky started loading the dishwasher. Other family members wiped down the counters and put away the leftover food. Some big kitchen knives were standing straight up in the silverware basket. Another relative got ready to close the dishwasher door. They wanted to wait until the rest of the dishes were ready before running it, but Benita stopped them. Benita was sure the dishwasher had not been loaded the right way. She opened the door back up. Then she started moving everything around herself, putting it all where she thought it should go. I am starting to wonder if it was about the dishes, or was Benita offended about something else? Relatives encouraged her to leave the kitchen alone because the cleanup was already under control. But Benita refused. She removed dishes that had already been loaded, shifted plates from one rack to another, and repositioned the cutlery while continuing to criticize how everyone else had handled the job. The open dishwasher remained where she had left it. Benita was still trying to prove she was right. She was not watching where she stepped. She turned quickly toward the counter to grab more dishes. Her right foot hit the open dishwasher door. She stumbled forward and could not regain her balance. As she fell forward, her left side hit the silverware basket first. One of the knives was standing straight up. It went into the left side of her chest, between her ribs. The knife reached her heart. Relatives immediately called emergency services and followed instructions to leave the knife in place. Benita lost consciousness within minutes as blood rapidly filled the sac surrounding her heart and leaked into her chest, preventing the heart from pumping effectively. Paramedics began advanced resuscitation and transported her to the hospital, but the injury had caused catastrophic internal bleeding. Despite continuous life-saving efforts, she was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the emergency department. I honestly feel for her family. Another death at a funeral. The coroner ruled the death an accidental penetrating injury to the heart. Investigators found no evidence of foul play. Their report concluded that the fatal incident resulted from a preventable sequence of events. Benita's death ended the funeral gathering immediately. The reception was canceled, and relatives reunited days later for her funeral instead. Becky was never blamed, but she struggled with guilt over their final argument for years. The family later adopted safer kitchen practices, determined that such a preventable tragedy would never happen again. A day that had already ended one chapter of the Lawrence family's history ended with another entirely preventable tragedy. Benita kept going even after everyone around her told her to stop. The next story takes us to Australia, where another woman ignored repeated warnings with equally tragic consequences. It was the 18th of January, 2020, in a beach south of Brisbane, Australia. The beach was full of families enjoying the summer, sunscreen and laughter filling the salty air, while just beneath the shallow water, something large and quiet was waiting. Deborah Glenn Smith was 48 years old, and she lived in Melbourne with her husband, running a successful home decor store. Friends called her confident and outspoken, but strangers often saw a different side, since she believed rules were more like suggestions and she hated being told what to do. That morning, rangers had placed warning signs along the beach after several large stingrays were seen feeding in the shallow water. Lifeguards told every visitor the same thing: either stay out of the water or use the stingray shuffle, sliding your feet instead of stepping down hard. Wild animals do not read warning signs, but humans are supposed to. Deborah was not interested in listening. She complained loudly that the beach closure was ruining everyone's holiday and accused the lifeguards of exaggerating the danger. After arguing for several minutes, she pretended to walk away with the rest of the crowd. But as the lifeguards turned their attention to another group of beachgoers, Deborah slipped around the end of the safety rope and walked barefoot into the restricted area. Smirking, she mocked the idea of the stingray shuffle and deliberately stamped her feet through the shallow water, determined to prove there was nothing to worry about. A lifeguard spotted her and shouted again, warning that stingrays often buried themselves beneath the sand. Deborah didn't even look back. She waved dismissively and took a few more heavy steps through the water as if daring the warning to be wrong. Then, without warning, her foot came down directly on a large stingray hidden beneath the sand. Startled, the animal lashed out instinctively. Deborah jerked her foot back in surprise, lost her balance, and pitched forward. In that instant, the stingray's tail whipped upward, and its serrated barb drove into the lower part of her chest. At first, Deborah blamed the lifeguards, accusing them of causing the accident by frightening her and yelling while she was in the water. She insisted none of it would have happened if they had simply left everyone alone. But within minutes, her skin turned pale, her breathing became fast and shallow, and she struggled to remain standing. As her strength faded, the same lifeguard she had argued with rushed to her side, began first aid, and called for emergency crews to transport her to the hospital. Respect costs nothing, but ignoring nature can cost everything. Surgeons found that the barb had gone deep into her chest and severely injured her heart, causing massive internal bleeding. Despite emergency surgery and blood transfusions, the damage was too extensive. She died later that day from hemorrhagic shock caused by the penetrating cardiac injury. The lifeguard warned her about exactly this: the stingray buried in the sand. She waved him off without turning around. Investigators later confirmed that the stingray had simply defended itself, the way any wild animal would. Lifeguards had followed every safety procedure. Warning signs were clearly posted, and multiple verbal warnings had been given before Deborah entered the closed area. Her death was ruled an accidental wildlife-related fatality. Experts said that if she had simply respected the closure or used the recommended stingray shuffle, moving her feet just a few centimeters differently through the sand, this tragedy would almost certainly never have happened.